So what are permanent disability advances? When does the insurance company have to pay them and what happens to them later? So the Labor Code says when temporary disability stops, permanent disability payments have to start within 14 days. So if you've been off work for a while, you've been getting temporary disability every 2 weeks. Once that temporary disability stops, you go back to work doing light duty perhaps, you go back to work doing your normal job, or you've run out of temporary disability. The insurance company paid it for a full 2 years. When those payments stop, permanent disability has to start 14 days later. So generally a pretty unbroken chain of payments from temporary disability into permanent disability. Of course, permanent disability raises a few issues. As soon as your condition, the temporary disability, stops because you've gone back to work, the insurance company may not know what the level of permanent disability is. They may not know if there's going to be any at all. So how does that work in general? First, the insurance company has to start permanent disability within 2 weeks of the temporary disability stopping, and they have to pay a reasonable estimate. So if the insurance company has a reasonable belief that there will be no permanent disability in your case, they do not have to start permanent disability advances. They're not required to start them if there's not going to be disability, permanent disability. However, if they can make a reasonable estimate of what the permanent disability should be, then they have to start those advances every 2 weeks. Do they have to know with certainty what the level is going to be? No. They just have to have a reasonable estimate or a reasonable belief as to what the level would be, because they're required to start those. So if your final disability level ends up being 20-30% permanent disability, and the insurance company hasn't advanced permanent disability at all, they can't sit back and say, we weren't sure what it was going to be, so we just didn't make payments. They have to start those within 2 weeks. But of course, there's exceptions to every rule. If you go back to work and you're working for the same employer and you're making at least 85% of your salary that you were before the injury, workers' comp doesn't have to start permanent disability advances. That's a new twist that went in 5-10 years ago. So if you go back to work, you're with the same employer and you're making at least 85% of your earnings from before the injury, the insurance company can just send out a delay notice and not advance permanent disability until a judge actually issues an award in the case. So in that situation, they're not required to start advances only because you've returned to work and are making 85% of your salary. The other big kicker that comes in is that the insurance company is required to start these permanent disability advances. They really have no choice, but these are permanent disability advances. They are going to get deducted from the final settlement. So if the insurance company makes a reasonable estimate and says, we believe your case is going to be 5% permanent disability, they advance out all of the 5% permanent disability to you. Eventually you see, let's say, a QME. QME gives a rating, whole person impairment, that rates out. Lo and behold, it's 5% permanent disability. The insurance company will not pay any additional money because those advances that they were paying all along, $290 a week generally, $580 checks every 2 weeks generally, depending on your earnings, those are all going to get deducted from that award. And if the final permanent disability award is 5% and they base their estimates on that, then there's not going to be any additional permanent disability. They truly are advances and they will get deducted from either stipulations or a compromise and release at the end of the case. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button down below and make sure to subscribe to the channel so you catch other videos.